Again, there's probably one of the other things which isn't discussed that much on the web is the pictures of the Lunar Rover. You know, there's some interesting things about the Lunar Rover. As you may be aware, the Lunar Rover was only taken up to the moon, according to the official story, on the later missions. It wasn't, I don't think, until Apollo 16, I think, was the first mission where they used a rover. Other people have measured, for example, the size of the rover and found that even if the wheels were folded up as is claimed, there wasn't enough space to it to fit. Wasn't enough space for it to fit in the command module.
Right.
Other people have. I haven't done that measurement, but apparently people like Jim Collier did that, and say that they didn't have enough space for it in the first place. These pictures that I've got on the screen here, which we can show, are very unusual. They look fine again when you look at them initially. But if you study them carefully, there are no tracks around the wheels. It's like this rover has been picked up with a crane and dumped on the set, or the tracks go in the wrong direction. What image over on the right, which is AS17-135-20544, you can see there aren't any tracks, in the front or back of the rover. It looks like it's just been dumped on the set. So I have those problems. Whilst we're on the subject of the Lunar Rover, I can also go to some other data which somebody sent me a few years ago, and it's to do with the battery system on the rover.
Before you go to that, Andrew, we need to just explain what the surface temperature of the moon is when it's lit by the sun. Just explain.
Yes, well, I mean, again, if you go and look at the official data for the surface of the moon, I wouldn't use Wikipedia. I avoided that source, but the actual surface temperature on the moon averages 107 degrees centigrade. So that's the average temperature on the surface of the moon.
So that's higher than boiling water.
Right, 107 degrees centigrade. That's the average, not the maximum, that's the average temperature. So that's 224 Fahrenheit to do the conversion. And somebody sent me a few years ago an interesting link. A chap in Germany actually sent me this link. So go and look at the Lunar Rover Vehicle Operations Manual. And this is a public document. It's on the NASA, one of the NASA archives, and you can go and download this document yourself. And it actually gives the specification and the tolerances for parts of the Lunar Rover system, one of which is the battery. And if you look at this column of data, these columns of data on their own data, maximum operating temperature limit for the Lunar Rover battery is 125 Fahrenheit. 125 Fahrenheit.
Which is in centigrade?
It's going to be about sort of
times by 5, divide by 9, and add 32 or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. It's going to be about 80 or 90 80 centigrade, right, something like that.
Just to make a comment from an engineer, right? I worked for years and years with hardware engineers designing all kinds of different things that would work outside on motorway systems, things in power stations, on railway lines, and when you're designing something, especially if it's going to work outside, whoever's manufacturing the subcomponents, there will be a temperature range that it will operate in, and you would not select that component, and if its operating range was outside of where it's going to be used, and that would be the most standard engineering practice to do that. So, for me, that is another smoking gun, Andrew. That they would fit a component, especially at NASA, into a device that specification was way outside its operating range. It's just the most basic of engineering errors.
Right, absolutely. So we have, you can see that right there from their own information is the hardware would not have worked. So yeah. So if the rover could not have worked, then why are they putting out this story that they took up a rover, took the rover to the surface of the moon? And also other people have pointed out, I haven't put it in my presentation, but you can speed up the film of the rover by about a factor of 1.5 times or 2 times, and it just looks like a car driving on a set, with the dust flying up and so on.
And there's another, you mentioned earlier that there's no cooling system on those rovers, which would mean they would be ridiculously hot.
Right.
Okay.
The components would all get very, very hot, And the tyres would get very hot as well. Obviously, the rubber can withstand heat and so on, but all kinds of problems like that.
And the same applies to the module that they used to get off the moon as well. That would have it was on the surface for hours.
Right. I mean, I think they were landed for 7-8 hours or something on the first mission. I don't think they were there very long. But I've pointed out to people, I think in this presentation I also make a point of it. If you drive to the supermarket and you're on an asphalt surface, you go in and get some stuff and it's a hot sunny day, middle of the summer, and it's 25-30 degrees. You put the windows up so that nobody nicks anything from your car. You come back to your car after maybe half an hour, whatever, an hour, and you put your hands on the wheel and you're going to hurt your hands.
And if it was 107 degrees,
how did they maintain the internal temperature to something that the astronauts could stand? They claim that they had battery power for the air conditioning. That's the official claim, as I understand it, that the air conditioning within the module was battery powered. But you can compare it to a car, because you've got 3 guys in there, so you're going to have a similar sort of volume of air within the module to a car. You don't have any convection on the moon because there's no atmosphere. So a car can be cooled by convection. In other words, when you start driving the car, the air coming past the car will cool it down. You can't do that on the moon because there's no gas to give that sort of cooling. So you can only cool it by radiation. So how did they do it? How did they keep the lunar module cool? I mean, to me, when I thought about it, I never thought about this years ago. When I believed the Apollo story. How did they keep it cool?